everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Silver Liming. I am so grateful to be here, healthy and whole, to bring this podcast to you as I've really put a lot of heart and soul into this because I find that when you're going through recovery from something like Lyme and tick-borne illness, when it's chronic, a long-term illness, it's really helpful to have some stories about other people who have recovered, who are in recovery, who have figured out different ways to help themselves heal. And yeah, there's my little dog. He doesn't usually appear on here, but there he is in the background. For all of you who have never seen him before, that's the love of my life. And, again, I just want people to understand what this specific illness looks like and a little bit more about what it takes to get better, because I found through about probably 70% of the people I've interviewed, mold has been a major component of their struggle with Lyme and tick-borne illness. And no two people have healed the same. Every person has had something different with their healing experience. And I think also partly what lends to that is our own bio-individuality and really what comprises us as people. Me being trained as an Ayurvedic practitioner, I know that each person has their own individual constitution. And I really think this is a space where we see that. What other potential underlying health conditions does a human have? What is it that they're really comprised out of? Again, from an Ayurvedic perspective, we're all made from the five elements: earth, air, fire, water, and space. And really, what is the blend that is unique to that person? And depending on that, will again help to understand a little bit more about how to heal that specific individual. But also, when we think of it on a holistic lens level, it's not just a physical healing. There has to be much more to it. There is a spiritual component to it. There is an emotional component to it. There's a mental component to it. All of these things factor into the actual individual journey and what makes people fully heal in the end. And I have found that a lot of people who have long-term or chronic Lyme oftentimes experience some type of emotional trauma that potentially triggers things in the first place. So I'm not sure if that applies to my guest today. We'll let her certainly weigh in on that. And as a final thought with things before I let Brooke get going here, I wanted to share with you that I recently was reading an article that was discussing about mosquitoes and that they are not responsible for transmitting Lyme. And I still have some mixed emotions about that, some different thoughts on it. If you as a listener have any thoughts about that or any additional information that you can cite in the comments, that would be greatly appreciated, because for the longest time I've been told that mosquitoes can transmit Lyme and tick-borne illnesses. And now they're saying potentially that no, that's not the case. And I definitely want to know the right answer to that specific question. So if you're listening, and again, you can shed some insight on that, feel free to leave some more information in the comments. But without further ado, my guest today is somebody that I've had the pleasure of coming across on social media. I love the power of social media for this particular purpose because there are so many of us out there that are doing our best to share information, to educate others so that they don't have to experience what we've gone through. And without it, I wouldn't have met as many wonderful people in the Lyme community. And I'm just really grateful again for all of the connections that I have to each and every one of you through the social media platform. But again, my guest today joining us is Brooke Nogueira Covington, and I'm sorry if I did not pronounce the first last name there properly. I should have asked you before we got started. I'll let you correct me if I am not doing that in a good job. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about who you are, Brooke, and how you came into this space of Lyme and tick-borne illness. And I know that you have a family, and I just applaud you even more because I know how difficult it was just to go through this alone, let alone to have children and a partner that you're bringing through this as well. But thank you for being here on the Silver Liming. I am again very grateful for your time and your vulnerability through this process.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me on. This is just an amazing platform that I just am grateful to you for, putting a positive piece out there, because both of us know, sometimes it can be very daunting and lacking in the positivity realm. So, I found your podcast in the thick of some of my suffering. And so it really touched me. I'd sit in my hot bath soaks and listening to your podcast, just gripping on to anything that might, lend strength into that next day. So thank you for that. And, kind of before I even get into my journey, I just want to say that, the basis I, never saw a tick, never had a bullseye, and all of my tests were negative. And so, there's such a misconception about that, and just putting it out there in the world that you don't need those things, to figure out what's underlying. So yeah, I'm Brooke Nogueira.
Thank you.
I live in the Appalachian Mountains of Western Virginia, born and raised here. I'm a wife. I'm a mom to two little girls, and also an occupational therapist in the skilled nursing home setting. So I'm definitely in the medical world, which I think has benefited me in terms of advocacy for myself. Grateful for that piece of it. Before tick-borne disease touched my life, about 10 years ago, me and my husband traveled the country. We kind of just picked up and left and, bought a fifth wheel and a dually, and we traveled around the country. And I say this because, we really lived out a dream. My husband, the big dreamer, me, the rational thinker. But I'm so grateful that he, pushed me even in that moment, because more than ever, I know the value of health, and you don't know you're going to make it to retirement age. You don't know. And if you do, are you going to be well enough and functional enough to do what you want to do and see what you want to see? So I'm so grateful for that experience. But leading into my story, starting about almost 2 years ago now, life was good. Everyone was well and healthy. The first incidents for me as a marker in time was in November of 23. I had a mysterious, linear, bizarre rash on my back. It kind of caught all of us off guard. Like, what is that? We're thinking, oh, maybe this is a stress rash, because mind you, at the time we had some stressors going on. My dog was ill, and, we're not sleeping, and we're taking care of her and rushing her to appointments. So definitely, I think a stress factor could have been part of everything kind of prompting for me. So that was followed by, a week later, I had this, random pain in my foot that I chalked up to that day being at like a Christmas event. No, I wore boots all day. Yeah, that's why. But it lasted about 2 or 3 days. And then I had pain that it migrated from there to my neck. Oh, my neck hurts. Maybe I slept wrong. And 2 days later, I couldn't open my mouth to take a bite of food. It was, oh, okay, well, that's related to my neck. As a therapist, okay, everything's connected. So, and then the kind of tipping point was I was at work, working with my patients, of course, and suddenly my right knee and left wrist, two very unrelated joints, just out of nowhere swole up, couldn't bend it, couldn't weight bear on them. And that was kind of like, this is connected. Okay, this rash definitely equates to, this random pain. And I'm telling the doctor, we go to see my doctor, and, she had no idea. She didn't put migrating joint pain together at all with chronic Lyme or Lyme whatsoever. But she did the ELISA test, and it wasn't on my radar whatsoever, but of course it was negative. And this was kind of the start of my love-hate relationship with prednisone. And this is a big piece of my story, because I have felt very much so hostage to that medication. What I found in going through this in the next, probably, I guess, 4 weeks at this point, got me through Christmas. She started me on an antibiotic because, of course, I had, low-grade fevers and swollen lymph nodes in addition to the pain. But still, we didn't know what it was. So, of course, the prednisone covered up everything. It covered up the pain. I could function. I didn't, I could move. I could step on my feet. I could use my hands, which really primarily is where this pain sort of settled. The migratory joint pain kind of settled, hands, fingers, wrist, ankles, and feet. And so, she got her labs back, and of course, nothing was coming back. The only thing that came back that they suspected was rheumatic fever. Oh, rheumatic fever, isn't that a rare, unusual condition? Of course, people don't get that now. It's kind of eradicated because of traditional Western medicine and antibiotics. And so that sent me, of course, down a referral path to infectious disease. And we all know kind of what that realm brings. He was no different. To mark in time for him, in multiple occasions. I think I saw him 3 different times. He made comments to me like, stop crying, or are you gonna cry? Are you gonna cry this time? And mind you, in these appointments, my husband is right by my side through all of this. And he's hot about it, of course. And so he speaks up and advocates for me. But it's like, if I can sit here and tell you a story and I'm not belligerent, I'm emotional because my function in my life has been ripped from me in a sudden, shocking way. And y'all can't tell me what's wrong, of course. So, you know, there's that piece of the pie of just, you would never say stop crying to a cancer patient. And for some reason, he felt it important enough in, his paid appointment to tell me to stop crying or almost kind of taunt at me about it. So that was my one first interaction with infectious disease. And then we went to a second opinion, of course, because the first one was pretty bad. And still at this point, no answers, no nothing. Everything's coming back pretty much clear. And we go to a pretty prestigious hospital here in Virginia. I see the chief medical officer of the infectious disease department, which I was grateful, but still yet, he was wonderful, yet he says, I have nothing for you. I don't know. It seems rheumatic in nature is what he said. And, out of frustration, you were like, we're just not getting answers. And, I'm crying and sobbing and just, frustrated thinking he's going to be my saving grace, this guy. And he asked even 4 other infectious disease doctors there at that time. And of course, no one caught it. Not a single person thought, oh, migratory joint pain. She has chronic Lyme, not a single one. So we've now got, at this point, 5 infectious disease doctors on board. And I'm defeated at this point. We're a few months in, and then, the next likely referral is rheumatology. Okay, let's go see rheumatology. That was no better. At this point, I'm still bound by prednisone, and unfortunately, that was a decision that I made because the alternative was laying in bed. And I have 2 young girls and I have a family, and I know I show up for them, never mind showing up for me. And that was a challenge. Like you said, having a family is a whole different piece to this pie.
Yes.
At the same time, a driving force of, motivation. I can't just lay in bed. I can't just lay in bed. It, you have to get up and you have to keep going. If there was a day that I maybe felt bad for myself or something, there's no option for that. You have bills, you got to go to work. I'm there for my husband, but that is one piece of the pie that just, it was actually a really positive thing having my family on board. So at this point, I see this rheumatologist, and he's trying to wean me off of this prednisone, and he's like, come back if you get worse. He has no answers. Still tons more tests. We're like 60 plus tests in at this point. I'm numerous antibiotics in at this point too, at least 6, 7 at that time. And we have to go back to him, of course, because the pain and the inflammation and the stuff is coming back, and it is bone breaking pain. Some people relate it to like post-surgical pain, that type of just almost like, bugs. These bugs are literally, I felt like feasting in my joints, just having a heyday. And he says to me, you kind of look like you have psoriatic arthritis, but you really don't fit the bill for psoriatic arthritis. So, let's stick you on some methotrexate. Let's, give you shots in your wrist every couple months, and let's do that. But, the list of side effects and, precautions with the methotrexate alone were intense. And so I say to him, okay, well, I'm going to get on this medicine you say, and then the hopes is that you're going to wean me off of this medicine, correct? And he goes, well, no. And I'm 37 at the time, and I'm like, what do you mean no? Me and my husband are obviously there, and he goes, well, I find that when I get patients off of methotrexate that they get worse. Well, I'm thinking, now what I know, well, yeah, of course they are, because now you're not hiding what's lurking below the surface. And my husband goes, how many 37-year-old women or people do you see like her? Like, this is an extreme case. This pain, I can't even hold my hands against gravity It is that intense. I'm holding my own hand with the alternative hand because I can't even hold it up. It was excruciating. And he goes, I see people like you all the time. And that has stuck with me. I have dreamed about it. Just the fact that there are people out there, me, with this horrible pain. You can't explain it. None of your tests tell you what it is. And yet you stick them on a medicine and you say, next,
Yep.
next patient, it's so I'm in the medical world. So this one hits home for me. And I lose a lot of hope at this point. I don't want to go see anyone else in the Western medicine world. I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm still suffering. So the next step was going, I by a referral of a friend, she said, you should go see functional medicine. And I'm like, all for it. In the OT realm, we're holistic of mind and thought. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go see functional medicine. Of course, it's out of pocket. Nothing's paid for. Okay, that's another, chunk of money after the last, 6 months of
Totally.
bills and bills, right? So I go to her not having any idea that she is Lyme literate. I have no idea. I just know she's functional medicine. And so me and my husband sit down with her, and of course, I tell her everything. And she goes, well, I think you have Lyme disease, and I think you have Bartonella, likely Bartonella. And me and my husband, we both just in synchrony look at each other like, what did she just say? What did she? I've never heard of this condition, never heard it like that. So we were like, well, what's Bartonella? I know there was a whole education piece that came after that, of her pretty much pinning exactly what I have. She pinned it, and then 3 months of just trying to understand what she said to me and what does that mean and how does that look, and it still was so much. And at that point, her suggestion was for me to one either take laboratories that are more advanced from your Galaxy or your IGenics, or we could go see someone who does phase contrast microscopy. So still got to learn what is that. I don't know what that is. So we go and finally make an appointment a few months later. It's probably about 3 months later to go to this physiologist. And she was a blessing to me because she was able to put a name and a face to the enemy that I face. And so simply, I'll be honest, for her, it was a simple finger prick, specialized microscope, a screen, and the knowledge and power within her. I put my finger on one microscope slide and another one and two more, about total, I think it was 4. And she just slides it under her microscope, and then the rest is sort of history. One drop of blood within minutes, we saw chronic Lyme disease. Minutes. It was so almost instant. In that appointment, I was praying that I didn't have Bartonella, even though I had these really crazy rashes that, even though what we have is invisible, made me feel visible. At least people saw me in that way. Like, oh, look at this rash. Look at Brooke. Like, she looks like a vampire scratched her, and like bugs crawling under your skin. And literally kind of is what it is. But, to watch that one single drop of blood as a medical person, that one tiny drop of blood showed what no other test could show was so powerful. And I didn't have to question whether or not the laboratories were accurate. I knew they were accurate because I could look at it. I could see it. I could see it alive. In those first slides that she looked at, you see the biofilms. You see them in this little condominium. You see them all hanging out in this, little goo space. And you watch my white blood cells go doo 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 doo, look all around. They don't see it. You literally watch them not see it. And we get, probably 3 hours into this appointment, and that 4th slide, it was really interesting that that biofilm is breaking down, of course, because this blood is now dying blood. It's outside of the host. There's no oxygen. There's no life for it to thrive at this point. So it's coming out and looking for alternative places to go. And then it's wild to see the spirochetes in the wild of your blood. I like to say it's in the wild. It's like It's parakeets in the wild. um, I saw it like that, and I saw them coming out of this, biofilm housed condominium, she called them. And it was hundreds in one tiny chronic Lyme. And that's in one little pass on the microscope. So, you see the white blood cells coming in for defend, and now they see it because the biofilm is breaking down, and now they're out to be detected. So seeing that real raw data was such a gift to me that I didn't need, like I said, those laboratories, I didn't need those. I could see it. I could look at it in the face and know that was there. Bartonella was sitting there all inside the red blood cells. The Babesia had no idea that was on board, but of course saw some of that too.
Hmm.
So
And remind me the name of this base. What was the
type
name
of
of?
microscopy it is.
Yes,
Phase contrast microscopy.
thank you. And just out of curiosity, in terms of the cost for that, what does that look like? Do you remember?
It's very affordable.
Okay.
About $90 an hour, and it took about 3.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So that's a really great alternative then in terms of like an IGNX or another type of test, because those can be pretty pricey. Unfortunately, again, they're not covered by insurance. And so for people listening, maybe this is an alternative route for you to go that would maybe save you some time and energy and financial responsibility too. Was this person, did she specialize in tick-borne illnesses or just really more in reading people's blood?
Um, so what I believe, she had a background in biology. So she was a physiologist. Now, mind you, she can, look at your blood and say, this is what I see. This is what I see. But she cannot diagnose and treat you, but she can tell you and explain what she sees in that viewing field. Of course, at that point, she would make, this is what I see. You do what you will. Of course, you're going to go to someone who understands it in some realm fashion, maybe Lyme literate or maybe Chinese medicine, someone that's going to be able to help you. So it was the best spent money and all I had been through. And at that point, that was day to diagnosis. So that was 9 months in, which 9 months is short. And what I know now, it felt like eternity to me. But that's only one piece that's so positive for me, is I did feel like at least I caught it in 9 months, not 9 years. And it's never soon enough. It shouldn't have
Correct.
taken all of that.
Correct. It shouldn't take the will of God to help you figure out what's going on in your body. Like you should be able to go to a doctor. They should acknowledge that this is a possibility. They should have accurate testing that's available to you, that's covered by insurance, not something that you've got to figure out and go play like whisper down the alley basically and have someone refer you over here to over here to over here to over here to over here and finally land at a place that maybe can help you and you're already out X amount of time and dollars just getting yourself to that space. There's definitely, we've got to be able to do better. We've got to be able to do better in today's society and technology that's available. There has to be a better way for people. Um, and so I just also remember the day that I finally got diagnosed, it was like, right? Like, you're not crazy
Not
and it's
crazy.
really something wrong and that there is a name for it. And sometimes it's not the best to identify with things that way, but also again, it's like a relief because you know that, okay, now you've identified the enemy. Like you see it, you now can start to actually treat what is happening to you rather than just sort of guessing and taking random haphazard shots with different medications that may or may not get to the root cause of what your problem is.
Yeah.
So once you were diagnosed, then what happened after that? Were you able to get to a Lyme literate doctor? Did you continue with the steroids? What happened for you there?
So at this point, I had seen the functional medicine doctor, the Lyme literate doctor, which I didn't know she was. And of course, leading up to that physiologist appointment with the microscopy, I had been on doxycycline, I think a 2-month stint, and I had gotten pretty decent. I wasn't good, but I was decent to say I'm okay. I was functioning, I could walk, still pain, of course, but um, once I saw the physiologist, we went on to kind of go after Bartonella, which definitely seems to be like the forefront infection for me, or the dominant infection, and definitely the most persistent little guy. And we tried like a rifampin and Baxin for a month. And this is the part that a lot of people, don't tell you about. I didn't anticipate it, but after doing that 1 month of that combination, as soon as I got off of it, I went downhill fast. Like I went back to the beginning, if not worse. It came back with a vengeance. And, I wasn't prepared for that. I had a whole month in October of celebrating fall and, just my favorite season and all the things that kind of make me happy. And so that was hard. That connected me back to the prednisone. Unfortunately, I had my 20-year reunion and I had my best friend's 40th birthday, and I have to show up. You have to show up. So what's the alternative? You stay in bed, you cry, you don't move. That's not good. So I'm not moving if I just stay in bed. Or at the risk of the side effects that it might have on my body, I chose to take the prednisone for now. It was a for now, always a for now. Like get me to that next piece of healing. Can I heal? Am I going to heal? I didn't know. I didn't predict a setback. But during that time, it was a dark place. It never stopped working because I had the prednisone. Who can afford that? Who can just lay in the bed? I mean, I know the side effects of it, but it was a choice I had to make at the time. I didn't like it, and it was in my whole being to get off of it. So I went at that point it was about another 6 months. Everything kind of happens in these like little 6-month stints for me. But that was a time of a lot of suffering, and I was mad. I was somewhat resentful, but at the same time, I asked God, like, why are you putting me back through this? What is the lesson here? There's got to be some takeaway. And when I went through it in the beginning, I didn't know what to call it. What's wrong with Brooke today? Why are you walking weird? Why are you crying at the end of your workday? It's like you don't know. But at least in this next setback, I knew what it was. I could start to identify with it. I could start to put the pieces together and journal and write. And, I'd even, take videos just talking to myself so that I could like mark that time in history. But, pulled up through that. I credit to, again, my family. My husband is amazing and such an advocate for me and adores me. And even at the ugliest points of my life of, just disabled, can't even hold a coffee cup, can't hardly put my shoes on in the morning, hold a toothbrush, hold my little girl's hands. It was to have to tell my kids not to squeeze my hand so tight when holding it that was hard. Try not to cry. But
It's a lot.
yeah, those are moments why I share my story, because I wish I had a me. I wish I had a me for me when I was going through this initially. And of course, I came across you and multiple other podcasts. But now, it's important for me to be that person for others. I speak about, what I've been through. Even if people don't understand it, they can choose to at least empathize. I have people still in my life, close people in my life that have seen some of that suffering, but still yet somehow they don't understand or don't care. And I don't want to say care, but I don't know if, I'm sure you probably have some similar experience like I did, but they just don't know. They just don't know. And it's more work to explain what I've gone through than to just be okay with not. And even feeling like I shouldn't even say the word Lyme out loud. Like, I have Lyme disease. I've learned that that's not okay either. Like, I have Lyme disease. I didn't choose this. I don't know how it happened. I can't explain that I've gotten sick with this stuff, but I have been very much so on a path to healing. And it's been a journey. I can say, since since that setback, what did work for me from a Western medicine world was I had gotten on with my functional medicine doctor again, and we got on Bactrim, along with all kinds of adjuncts, the biofilm busters, the enzymes, the supplements, the everything that goes with it, the tinctures, the oils, everything that you have to do. I called it the 50 pill full-time job. At one point it was 50 pills, and managing that. Don't eat this here, but eat that here, and take this before this 1 hour, and make sure you take it 2 hours after this, and then figure out your full-time job, your children, your husband, never mind your sanity. So it's fully loaded, as you know. Um, Healing, I've done a lot. I feel like um, I have this setback definitely brought me into a realm of how can I get well? What can I do when I feel like things aren't working? I've tried some things like, vibration plate, which I love that for me in terms of lymphatic support. I adore my infrared sauna blanket that I can just roll out and do at home and turn on my healing frequencies and kind of zen out for an hour. And of course, lots of other things. I also have come into Chinese herbs. Some of this stuff even as an OT, I would have been like, man, I don't know if that stuff works, but that really helped me transition off of those heavy Western medications into just a more healthful life. So I am at that point right now this summer. I've been able to do things and function, and that is gold. It is gold to just basics. Take a casserole out of the oven, pour my own coffee, never mind the big things that I've been able to do. This summer, I told my husband, I said, when I get well, I'm going to golf. And I have fought him to the nail on golfing. I'm a softball player, so I'm like, I don't know how to swing like that, And I've golfed a couple times, both with my kids and my husband, and I climbed half of a rock wall. I could have never dreamed of doing that. Not ever putting that kind of weight through my joints and bones. Just even jumping. I'm dancing in the rain. I've danced in the rain with some of my best friends, just like enjoying that moment, and just really you don't realize how easy it is to take things for granted, like such basic stuff in your life. And I share because I don't want people to go through it alone. You don't have to. There's power in sharing. So I'm just really grateful, and I just feel like people need to know, just never think it can't be you, but just know if it becomes you, you can get well and you can heal, and there are ways to get there, and it's not always the same cookie cutter way as the next person. I mean, I found myself looking online and your podcast and other podcasts, typing in migratory joint pain. Anyone else have that? And when I hear someone say I had this migratory joint pain, it just like 2 days here, and then it would morph into the next area. And I tell my husband it's fading from this wrist. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's going somewhere. It was the wildest thing. But of course it would show up in my ankle and my knee, and just it's been something. But I'm grateful for where I'm at in terms of my healing journey, and I hope that just continues. I think mindset is a big piece of that. I know you touch a lot on mindset, and it's very powerful to stay positive even when the curtains are pulled and it's dark in there. But
Probably the most important time to stay positive, even though it's probably the hardest time to stay positive. And, gratitude is also, I think, a huge component. And I'm just sitting here listening to you and how thankful you are to be able to do the simple things in life. And that's what we say, it's like you don't get it till you get it. And when you got it, then you're understanding and you're a lot more sympathetic towards people's plight, because to not be able to pour your own coffee, to not have your little girls be able to hold your hands, to like that makes me want to cry because I understand it, right? And I know how dark it can be, and I know how lonely it can be. And I'm really glad for you that you had support in terms of your husband and your family, and you at least had those champions next to you to help encourage you and cheer you through the darkest days. Because it is overwhelming sometimes when we're a fully functioning human and you basically hit a brick wall and you can no longer do those kinds of things for yourself. Like you can't take care of yourself, you can't cook, you can't do laundry, you can't function. Like for me, I was constantly looking at people like, how do they have families? How are they surviving? Like I'm barely able to find food to put into my mouth. Like how are people having these rich lives? Like I don't understand where I'm going so wrong. And it was partially because I wasn't being properly diagnosed, that people just kept telling me there's nothing wrong with me from a medical perspective. And that'll really mess with your head after a fair amount of time too. It's like, okay, well then God just made me broken. Like I've been made broken. And so there's just something very systemically wrong with me that they're not quite aware of yet. And hopefully they'll figure it out before I die. But I mean, I really thought I was dying. And I can
Mhm.
imagine for you too, like again, when you're a fully functioning human and then all of a sudden you're no longer able to cope that way, it's difficult. And I've thought about it a few times to just call out, like when you're crying at the doctor, when you're angry, when you have these things, there's something, first of all, called BART rage, which um, is a thing that you're generally, your emotional spectrum is a lot different when you're experiencing this. But that's partially because we have infection, right? And when we have a cut on our leg and it gets infected, what happens to it? It gets really red and angry and sore. And when we have an infection in the brain, same thing happens. Our brain swells, it's angry, it's not happy. And so that expresses itself through our being a lot differently as well. And if you're listening and you're having uncontrollable bouts of anger or crying. I mean, I would cry all the time for no reason whatsoever. And I couldn't understand, like, why am I just this crying person all the time? And I understand, like, that was the illness. That wasn't me. That was the actual infection. And that helps a lot when, again, you are properly diagnosed and you can say, like, okay, this isn't me, this is the infection. Even if you have a setback like you've experienced, like it's like, all right, well, I know this isn't me, this is just the infection. And so you can just keep pushing through and doing what I can do to just get by from day to day. And I used to remember, I would tell myself just one foot after the next. Literally, that's all I could think about was like one step at a time, like not one day at a time, not 1 minute at a time, but one step, because it was so hard to even move myself one step at a time. And I'm appreciative of your energy and thoughts and just helping guide people better and hopefully to a faster diagnosis than what you experienced. 9 months, sadly, is an incredibly long period of time to not feel well, but it's kind of short in this space, and that's a terrible thing. That's one of the greatest crimes against humanity is that people are left to suffer for months, years, decades. Like it's there's got to be something different that we can do about that. And again, through people like you, people like myself, other guests I've had on the podcast, we are doing our own grassroots movement, right? We're doing our own effort at educating the public so that people are aware of this because like you, many people get bitten, they have no idea about it. Ticks are stealthy, they are smart, they inject a numbing agent when they're attached to you that you don't even feel them feeding on your blood supply. Like and they're so small, so you don't see them. Only 35% of people maybe get a bullseye rash. And I've got thoughts about that, why that is the way that it is. But it becomes very difficult then when you're left with this set of symptoms that make zero sense. And again, some of the Western medicine community, I don't think it's for a lack of caring, but sometimes it sounds like that, especially with the infectious disease doctor that you went to. I do feel that all doctors ultimately got into their line of training because they want to help people and help them feel better. But this one is something that's far beyond their comprehension at this point, and it's unfortunate because, again, we say like if you had cancer and you were going through chemo, people would be like, oh, how can I help you? Let me get you meals. Let me help support your family. Here, have a free house or, whatever it is. Whereas when you have Lyme, it is like you said, like it's almost like you don't utter that word even because it's just so
It's
portrayed so poorly in our society and people's comprehension. And I think recently we've had some more celebrities that are coming to the forefront that are unfortunately being plagued with this as well. And I think that's changing the narrative more in our favor, which is great, but it's sad that it takes that. And that's Justin Timberlake just came out and said that he has it. And I got all these people sending me articles about it. And I was like, you know what's crazy to me is that it has to be a celebrity. It has to be someone like this that's calling the attention to it when there are hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people struggling with this illness, and that's not enough to move the needle. Like
Right.
the masses aren't enough to make it a different story. It has to be a celebrity. It has to be somebody who's pulling weight like that. And I'm glad that it's happened. I'm not happy for him that it's happened. But glad for our community because again, at least it's calling out a little bit of a different perspective onto what we really struggle with and what we really go through. But the financial costs, the emotional impact, everything that happens to a person, we've got to figure out a way to do better. And
Absolutely.
I'm encouraged, like I've seen a lot of articles recently talking about different testing methods, or I think it was the New York Times actually published an article acknowledging that chronic Lyme exists. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Big news.
thank God, right? Like you and
Oh,
I lived
horse a
it.
horse. Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone through it. I mean, it took me 7 years to get diagnosed, 7 more years to fix myself. Like, and I'm not a doctor, but by now it's like I sort of feel like I could be because I've researched so much, I've read so much, I've studied so much by lack of choice, by just pure having to go through it. I've become a specialist in it. And it sounds like you've gone along the same path, right? Like we
Right.
have to learn how to do it ourselves. We have to become our own best advocate. And that also is very problematic because when you're not feeling well, it's like
Mhm.
one of the hardest things to make your brain comprehend the information that you're trying to even absorb to help yourself with. Like
It's big stuff. I mean, when you feel bad, the last thing you want to do is, try to put one more thing on the plate and tip the scale. You know, you mentioned something about Justin Timberlake, and just, I'll tell you that a very close friend of mine who has seen a lot of suffering for me, like a very close friend, I mentioned it. I said, did you hear that he is sharing that he also has what I have? He has Lyme disease, and what, assume, I don't know, chronic or not, but and her immediate response was, "Oh, who cares?" And I could not believe it. And that's someone that's close to me, and she's this person still somehow didn't connect that it meant a lot to me, that I feel heard. That's the worst part, I think, of going through tick-borne disease, is it's just not being heard, and the feeling so dismissed, and like what you have is taboo, and it's so far from that. Like it's not far off to think that you can, be bit by a small animal that has tons of pathogens and they be passed to you. Why it still feels so outlandish, and where we are in the medical advances is still a little mind-boggling. But it just, you, being, willing to share the story, and make sure people hear you. But I find myself trying not to be pushy because I see it every day. I see it every day. I see it around me every day now. I'm like, yep, and I've been able to guide some close friends, and they have gotten to diagnosis, even people that had done an immunoblot. Their immunoblot was negative, but of course they have chronic Lyme, and we were able to detect that, through the phase contrast microscopy, that you do have it and you do have to treat it, and this is what needs to happen. Um, so just, living proof that you're not crazy, that there is something wrong with you, and you trust your instincts, and you know your body best.
That's right. And good job for being there for others as a resource and a rock to help support and guide. Because when you're like the first out of your group of people that you know to go through it, it's tough, right? And I always think about leaders go first, right? Leaders go first. Unfortunately, in this instance, it's not a pleasant experience to go through first, but then you're left and it's something that will permanently change you for the better, in my opinion, because you're just a lot more understanding, a lot more empathetic, a lot more grateful, again, for the simple pleasures that we take for granted in life. Just being able to get out of bed in the morning, to be able to brush your teeth, to be able to, again, pour your own coffee and do the things that are normal on your own. And it's like, okay, I have a much greater understanding of life now. And again, a much deeper appreciation for all the small things. And it is the small things that make the difference. And we are nothing without our health. That is truly my thoughts. And I have a post-it here that talks about health is the greatest gift, right? Like it really is the best gift that we could ever have. We could have all the tea in China, all the riches in the world. And if we don't feel well, we're not really going to enjoy that because you can't even function. Like it's just very difficult. Um, so I really, again, I do appreciate all that you do for our community and teaching people and showing them the way and helping them to not suffer as long as you did or to end their suffering faster because without people like you sharing your experience and telling other people about this danger that they really need to be mindful of, they may never get an answer, right? And next thing you know, they're getting a hip replacement or a knee replacement or heart surgery or whatever else happens to people because this has gone too long in their bodies without being checked. And as a final question for you, Brooke, I was just curious. You had said one of like the worst part about going through tick-borne illness, but I'm curious, what is the best thing that's happened to you as a result of getting Lyme and tick-borne illness?
And I've thought about that because I'll be honest, I really, I really wanted to share my story, and I question, like, what is my silver lining in my journey? Like, do I have one? Because it can be an ugly place. So it really, you asking me to come on made me dig deep, and I really appreciate that because you're like, where is the lining? Where's the lining at? Um, I'm just so grateful to my husband, my biggest advocate, and just a devoted father, and that I didn't have to do it alone. I'm just blessed with my kids, and understanding that even then my suffering, they were understanding that mommy didn't feel good, and they knew I couldn't put them to bed that night, or it wasn't because I didn't want to hold their hand. I'm just really moved to be able to help others, and be the me that I needed in my journey, and get them, like you said, to diagnosis faster. And that I'm also grateful that before this happened, I was not even taking a multivitamin. I had just given up on like myself. I was so consumed with two under two kids, and working full time and traveling for work and all the in and outs of life that you just don't really get a minute to yourself. So I'm definitely a lot more aware of my health and what I can do to support my body. And I make sure to do those things and carve out time. And, if I want to go do my sauna blanket, my husband's got things under wraps, for that hour. And I'm just very grateful to be functioning, that I've been able to golf and I've kayaked the river, and I did my first real plank a couple weeks ago, where I could actually put weight through both of my hands and not in this weird modified way. I did it like I normally did it 2 years ago. So, you know, that I can pull my weeds and, sweat away outside and dance in the rain. It's possible. There's lots of ways to heal, but I'm grateful I'm at where I'm at this point. So, and I'm happy to have been able to share it, and hopefully I help even just one person that identifies with my story. Yeah.
I have done that. And just even listening to you and talking about the people that you've helped along the way already, just remember that it's a beautiful gift to be able to be alive, first of all, but then to be able to help guide others again towards better health, even if it's just not related to Lyme, right? Like you inspire people to take better care of themselves, and that in the end is serving for the greater good. And that's just a very beautiful thing to see happen. So I just really appreciate you. And maybe one day we'll get to meet in person. That always makes things even more fun. But thank you so much for listening to my podcast, for participating with me here, for sharing your story. And I would imagine you're okay if people reach out to you on social media to connect further.
Yes, ma'am. I have a Lyme and co-infection just dedicated Instagram.
Okay.
It's called at the bottom Lyme.
Yes, which I love. Yeah. Thank you.
Love a good play on words.
Yes, I love it. Well, I really appreciate you, Brooke, and we will look forward to sharing this episode soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And there are other shows available, other guests that I've had on. And if you'd just like and follow on the good old YouTube or on Facebook, that would be greatly appreciated because it helps other people like Brooke find me here and be able to A, share their story, but B, hopefully gain some hope and find a better ending to their life as well. So thank you so much, Brooke. I appreciate you tremendously.
You.